The Lebanon Police Department is hiring. In episode 111 of the Love in Lebanon podcast, we take a closer look into the process with Major Rich Mount. Major Mount details the hiring effort, what being with LPD for almost 30 years has meant to him, and of course, we had to talk basketball as well. Episode 111 starts now.
Welcome to the Love in Lebanon podcast, highlighting all the great things happening in Lebanon, Indiana. Have an idea for an episode? Send an email to loveinlebanon@lebanon.in.gov.
Hey everybody, thank you for listening to this episode of the Love in Lebanon podcast. We are kicking off a hiring event for our police department, and to help us do that this time around in this episode, we've got Major Rich Mount of our Lebanon Police Department. Major, thanks for being here on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it very much. And LPD is just kicking off, rolling out a hiring process and a chance to join the team, join the force. And if you can help us out, what kind of goes into joining the police force, and if you kind of take us through that process, please.
The hiring process, like I said, you just commented, we opened it up March 20th. It'll last till April 21st, and that'll be the pre-app stage. So if you go to the website, there's a pre-app you fill out, and that's where it starts.
Gotcha. And 29 years in law enforcement, I'm guessing things have changed just a little bit since you went back and went through about 3 decades ago or so.
It's changed a lot. When I got hired, it started out with a radio. We didn't have computers. We shared cars. Each shift would go pick someone up. Then they'd start their shift. So it's changed considerably since 1994.
Did you honestly think that you'd be in the law enforcement field as long as you have, and have loved it as long as you have?
Yeah, when I first got introduced to it, of course I was playing college basketball at Purdue, and my summer job, met a guy by the name of Sam Myers. Well, I knew of him, but he kind of introduced me to it, and I rode, and so I kind of took a liking to it right off the bat, and lasting 29 years is a long time. But, when you love something and, you get to put back in the community, it's a great thing.
Yeah, and we know Sam, former police chief and really good man in our community. If you can kind of help us out, and what's the whole academy process like now these days? And there's a whole webpage that we'll put in the body of the podcast, and people can go and research that. But as far as the academy goes and all the kind of tests you have to go through to be able to have the badge, to be able to have the firearm, protect our community.
Yeah, so you only have to have a high school diploma. And like I said, we start out with the pre-app. Once we get the pre-apps, we have a physical and a written test. So if you get by that with the standards that the academy requires, then it goes on to interviews. And, once you get that conditional, you have to go to the perf, physical check, and psychological. And so before you even reach the academy, you got to go through steps before you get to conditional. As long as you pass all that, and sometimes we've been starting with FTO, which is field training, prior to the academy. Sometimes you might get hired and go to the academy, but you have to do certain physical, what the academy requires. So we got to make sure you're physically fit and mentally fit.
Yeah, gotcha. You talked about the physical and the mental side of things. Other personality or other traits that you found beneficial and helpful during your time in law enforcement?
Yeah, it's so technical, and I'm not sure, being in this law enforcement field for 29 years, they look at that psych eval down there, and they can detect, they look for a certain criteria, and they're going to let us know if they're capable of doing that mentality-wise, and I don't know the breakdown on that. But, the traits you got to have is be able to talk to people, have a conversation. That's been challenging in the last 10 years because a lot of kids are tech-savvy. They want to email, they want to do this, they don't want to have a conversation. You're going to be in the community, you live here, you're going to have a conversation. So you better learn right off the bat. But you have to be able to talk to people, and that's a big thing to have. Be physically fit. And we can't have out-of-shape police officers. Unfortunately, over the years, it's gotten more dangerous, even in little towns, big cities. So we're right close to Indianapolis. So there's a lot of things that you need to have, and just have common sense. Common sense smarts. That goes a long way in law enforcement.
And folks, we're talking with Major Rich Mount. He is with the Lebanon Police Department. The department rolling out a hiring initiative, and you can get more information on the body of this podcast, but also we're adding some things that you'll see throughout the course of the week and days and months to come on the city's website as well. In talking about and kind of previewing before we started to hit record, Major, and talking about the kind of overall kind of culture and mission of the department, it seems like a pretty close-knit group, and the word family keeps coming up. Anytime you talk to a couple of police department officers, it is all about family and kind of that brotherhood. Have you felt that over the years? And
yeah, I mean, at a smaller police department, you're able to have that family sense of brotherhood, sisterhood. Big cities, sometimes officers don't know each other. So here, even if we end up having 100 officers, it's still going to be a close-knit family atmosphere, and that's what we want to provide. We go through a lot of things when you're on the street, seeing a lot of bad things. And a lot of people don't realize that. So, they need to be able to come to some of us as mentors. Hey, this is what we need. You need some help or whatever it may be. So, yeah, I mean, it is a family-oriented place. That's what we try to provide. And it's been a great place.
What's it like going from being the new guy on the block to an elder statesman within the department, helping to kind of create and foster that family atmosphere, like you mentioned, to be able to have such a close-knit group? And anytime you're in the police station, everyone's just the special bond that's there and a special feeling when you walk through the door.
Yeah, I think that early on in my career, I had good supervisors, good mentors. Now, sports for me played a big part in this because I'm considered the player coach. I'm major in charge of road operations. I got this team out there, and so they feel like they're comfortable to come to me, and that's what you need. So I think that's a big part of it. If you're in a situation where you have good mentors in this field, then you'll learn how to deal with different personalities or different people, how to deal with them. And that's what my job is. So, yeah, it's a brotherhood, and we want them to feel comfortable to come to me, and that's it.
Now, you mentioned the game of basketball. The door's kind of open. I got to walk through it now. And if you go up to Lebanon High School, you'll see a jersey that and a picture of a guy that looks a lot like the one I'm sitting across from the table of in there.
Yeah.
And how much of the game of basketball has kind of transitioned into law enforcement? You talk about the player coach that you are now with LPD. How much of that has kind of been drawn from your love and ability to play the game of basketball?
Any kind of sport that treats you the ups and downs, you lose some, you win some. I didn't like to lose, but
You didn't do it very often.
No, not very often, but you recover, you make a positive out of a negative. So, teaching these young officers is kind of like the same way you're coaching football, basketball, baseball, whatever it is. Hey, you're down right now, but get back up. Be confident. You want to talk to somebody, fine. And so it's taught a lot over the years, and I think it's carried on in my life, with that kind of situations.
And having this be your hometown and being able to go and if you don't mind, we'll talk basketball a little bit later on in this podcast. Can't resist. But how often do people still come up to you, and has it helped in that endeavor, kind of diffuse some situations, knowing that your last name, knowing the game of basketball and your ability and who your family is and all those things? Has that kind of helped diffuse some situations over the years where things were a little bit hot, but wait a minute, that's Rich Mount. I know this guy.
Right. It definitely helps.
Yeah.
It definitely helps. Yeah, I've been the most noticeable police officer since I got hired, most known, and it's paid off. There are situations that we had to overcome, and they calmed down. So it's been a good experience. I still enjoy the road. I'm still technically on the road, but I worked the road 28 years, and there was a reason for that. And so once these guys learn that and people get to know you, that does happen. It makes a difference to be known growing up. They kind of respect what you did and so forth. So
as we're talking about the hiring initiative for LPD, we've got Major Rich Mount with us. How has that transition been from going, and that's one of the great things about the department, is you can move up, and there are areas for advancement and things, and putting in your time and being rewarded for that. What's that been like for you, as you mentioned, to kind of get off the road and a little bit more and kind of get more office-oriented / coaching, as you talked about?
Right. It's been a good transition. I'm in charge of the hiring process, so I kind of put that together, and And so it's kind of neat that you put together a board, you get guys making decisions on who's the best for the city, and of course once we're done with it, it comes over with the city council and all that. But it's been a good transition. Like I said, I thank my mentors in the past, Sam Myers, Rick Hale, who hired me, guys like that showed you the way. Then you kind of create your own niche. And so, yeah, it's working pretty good.
Any other memories that stick out along your 29 years plus now with LPD that you remember fondly? You mentioned the mentors earlier on in this podcast, but anything else that sticks out to you? This is just a random off-the-cuff question.
I think that what sticks out the most in Boone County alone, that every police agency gets along. And I made it a point to where us and Boone County had a good relationship because their guys are working the road too. We can get along with Zionsville. We can get along with Whitestown. And I think a lot of counties are territorial. Boone has been different, and it's kind of an unusual situation. But since I was hired, we always had a good relationship. And it's just about respecting others. We border Whitestown. Boone County jail is in Lebanon. But that's a unique characteristic of this county.
And you make a really good point there, because it seems like it's more about the service of community over the service of self there, where, you're crossing my border here and having that border war, that territorial kind of feel like you mentioned. It seems like they put that aside, the ego aside, and go more so community service type thing. You found that too?
Yes, they're trained the same as we are. They go to LEA Academy too, and they got some good officers. And I tell our guys to get to know them. And we're all on the same team. I mean, that's the way it is.
This is going to be kind of a multi-pronged approach that LPD is pushing out. You get the podcast, there are some announcements, there'll be some video stuff, and you may see some things in the paper and on social media. If someone's listening to the podcast or reading something in the paper, all those things, and they're thinking about applying, thinking about going down that route, any advice for them if they're on the edge of the pool to get them to jump in and give it a try to see if law enforcement is something that will work for them?
If it's I got into it because we thought we could whip the world and help out and all that, and there was a lot of action. But the satisfying part is helping community, whether if you're coaching boys club basketball or coaching the football league, youth football, baseball at the Little League Diamond, you're making a difference as a police officer. We have a lot of officers that do that, coach wrestling, baseball, football. So if you want to help your community, and that's what you really want to do, then you got to come and try it out and see. If it's not for you and you realize that, then you can always step down. And
there are people that have done that, where they've gotten a couple steps in the process and realized, maybe it isn't for me, but at least they tried. They'd figured it out and figured out it wasn't for them.
Right. Yeah, that's happened just recently.
Yeah.
So you just got to try it out and see how it is. Even if you wanted to ride, I think you got to be 21 years old, and you can ride and get an idea. A lot of people start out at the Boone County Jail as a jailer. That's who we're going to deal with. Those inmates out there, you're going to deal with them on the street. Gives them an idea if they can deal with that type of clientele. So there's a lot of things you can do before you just jump right into it.
And folks, we're talking with Major Rich Mount with the Lebanon Police Department, with the department for 29 years. And Rich, it seems like you are still just as passionate about this. As you mentioned earlier, you're kind of leading the charge when it comes to the hiring process, which has begun with LPD. It seems like you're just as passionate as you were when you started, as you mentioned earlier on in the podcast. You still feel just as passionate about law enforcement and this community service that you did when you began?
Yeah, I was just telling a fellow officer that I'll probably do another 7-8 years.
Really?
Now I just want to make a difference, so when guys like us leave, it's not left a mess. And right now we've got some good leadership, and we got some good guys. So we want, as the city grows, we want to hire good quality officers. I'm all about being professional, and we need to be in that type of mode where we treat people right. Yes, we do deal with some clientele that don't like us, and we try to clean that up, and you got to learn how to deal with that. And that's what we'll train you on. There's about 21% we deal with. 79% of this community is law-abiding citizens. So it's just that's the way we're going. So,
and we got to get you out the door with talking about the NCAA tournament. And the gentleman whose office is behind me here was pretty upset after the first round. There was a 1 seed that went out. I know you saw a little bit of that.
Right.
If you can talk about what you thought about that, because you mentioned before we hit record that Coach Painter was a teammate
Right.
During your collegiate career.
So, yeah, Coach Paint and I, we 1989 Indiana All-Stars, and we came to Purdue together, and he's a great coach. And so, when your players can't throw it in the ocean and can't hit a shot, which that's what that means, can't throw it in the ocean, then you got a chance to lose. And they just didn't prepare themselves, but I was shocked a little bit. But, Payne will come back. He'll recoup, and he's always a very good preparer for the game. But your players got to play, and they didn't come to play.
And looking back at recent history, the first one to lose to a 16, the next year they won the whole thing. So maybe it's in
the works,
there
but
you
you
go.
just never know.
There you go. And the hiring process you mentioned, Major, has begun now. And when does it wrap up? So folks know to get on the ball and get going here.
March 20th it was open, and it'll stay open where you can fill out your pre-app till April 21st. 2023. So if you're interested, go to our city website and go to the police department and fill out a pre-app and go from there.
Major, thank you for coordinating the hiring effort. Thanks for your service to the community. 29 years and counting. 6, 7, 8, 9, another decade more, maybe.
Maybe.
And everybody, thanks for listening to this episode of the Love and Lebanon podcast. Again, you can hit up all the information and find out more about the LPD's hiring process in the meat and the body of this podcast, but also online as well, as Major Mount mentioned. You'll see some things in the days, weeks, and months to come to kind of get the ball rolling and kind of see if the law enforcement with Lebanon Police Department is right for you. Regardless, thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. More episodes are coming your way soon. Major, thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Take care, everybody.